in this state in particular, with all these colleges and women of color graduating with higher level of college degrees, that we should be in those positions. So I want to see a diverse cabinet. I want to see women of color, and I want to see that there's real change, that there's an accountability plan.
Hi, everyone. Give yourselves a hand for showing up tonight. Good evening. My name is Lee Hill, and I am the executive editor for news here at GBH. I am pleased to be here tonight with Deloris Pettis, interim president of the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus, and we are both delighted to welcome you to this town hall meeting. So I moved to Boston about a year ago from Harlem after spending years working in public media in New York City. I ran a daily national news program called The Takeaway, hosted by Melissa Harris Perry, still carried here on GBH. And as I settle into my new role here, running this newsroom, I am excited to meet as many people as I can. So glad to see you here tonight. I know that most, if not all of you, have deep roots here in Boston and have contributed to the rich fabric of our Commonwealth. But I also realize that for many of you, this might be your very first visit to our beloved GBH. So raise your hand if you're a first timer here to our facilities. Oh, wow, that looks like a majority. Okay, well, it is my hope that this will not be your last time here. At GBH, we are committed to covering the experiences and viewpoints of everyone, including underrepresented groups whose stories too often are underlooked and overlooked and underreported. Our newsroom, comprised of 89.7 FM, Channel 2, and WGBH.org, is currently deep in the throes of transformation. We're building one cohesive, audience-focused, multi-platform news operation that tells the most interesting and distinct stories of the day, which are infused, informed, and powered by the diverse communities that we serve. Therefore, one of my goals as the lead editor here is to not only drive our newsroom to its greatest potential, but to intentionally and thoughtfully push us to reimagine who we do journalism for and with. We're referring to it as a newsroom without walls. We're helping more people and more kinds of people hear and see themselves in the stories that we tell. I want to thank our audience impact producer, Annie Schreffler, and her team, her awesome team, who co-produced this town hall, and also send healing vibes and blessings to my friend and colleague, Callie Crossley, who's not feeling well tonight. She's under the weather and won't be able to be here. But standing in for her tonight is Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, who is here. Give it up for Charlotte for stepping in on a moment's notice. And finally, I also want to give a shout out to veteran journalist and former GBH news anchor, Carmen Fields. Raise your hand, Ms. Fields, who is in the audience and paved the way for many of us here who stand on your shoulders. Thank you, Ms. Fields, and thank you for being here tonight. Okay, well, again, welcome to GBH. We are honored to have you here. We are here we want you here. We're sharing our space with you, and it is our delight to see you. And we want you to make yourselves at home and know that we cannot do what we do without you and with your support. So again, welcome and enjoy tonight's conversation and enjoy your visit. Thank you. Deloris?
Thanks, Lee. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. It is so great to see you here. As MWPC's interim president, I am delighted to represent our organization as a lead partner with GBH in convening this town hall entitled Momentum, Remaking the Women's Political Contract. While this is our second conversation facilitated by GBH, it is our first public discussion post-primary where history has been made and may well be made again in November when major party women candidates winning several statewide offices. And at MWPC, that's our focus, getting women elected and getting them appointed to state office, public office. I want to acknowledge the women candidates and elected officials in the audience today. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for being here with us this evening. In convening this town hall, MWPC is honored to lock arms with a group of amazing, diverse women leaders who represent organizations that are doing magnificent things in their own communities. I'm excited to hear what they have to say this evening, and I bet you will be too. Thanks again, GBH Annie Schruffler, Frederic Rigolo, and Andrew Van Naas. Andrew, how did I do? For your outstanding partnership and for making this beautiful space available to us. After the program, we hope everyone will join us for a reception just outside the door, which has been made possible through a generous donation from M&T Bank. For those of you who are not aware, M&T Bank is a community bank which recently merged with People's United Bank, and it focuses on serving underbanked and underserved populations. The bank's Eastern Massachusetts Regional President, Grace Lee, is here with us tonight, I believe. Great, thank you. Great to see you. Along with her team, Emily Greenstein and Kim Gainsborough. Okay, thank you for your partnership and your support. At the reception, refreshments will be provided thanks to our caterer, Sam's Spot, and owner, Sam Anson. So hopefully you'll be able to enjoy the food and know that Sam Anson is our caterer for that. And last but not least, I must recognize our other MWPC leadership who made tonight possible. Don Shan, raise your hand, Don, who is on leave as president, and by the way, who recently won her primary as Democratic candidate for her state rep seat, Yahoo! And MWPC's associate director, Kat Klein. And together, we thank our board member, Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, who is the visionary and co-producer of tonight's event, as well as a very dear friend of mine. I'll be speaking about Charlotte in a moment. Now, this is where I would have planned to introduce Callie. But I have to say up front that we did not plan a bait and switch. So unfortunately, the award-winning broadcast journalist, Callie, as Lee has shared with us, is under the weather and can't be here. But guess what? We have a fabulous understudy, Charlotte Golar-Ritchie. So Charlotte has an illustrious career herself, and many of you know her. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if all of you know her. But for those of you who may be meeting her for the first time, Charlotte is a former state rep, a former NCAD commissioner, former housing chief for Boston, and maybe most important, the former production assistant and Chiron operator for WGBH. Thank you, Charlotte, for stepping in to take this leadership role and be our moderator. And now I'm going to turn this town hall over to you.
Thank you so much, Deloris. We've got a great conversation ahead of us, and I really feel blessed to be able to welcome you all here to GBH. I did not expect to be able to have this chance to do this, but I'm going to make the most of the moment because there are so many friends here present, and you're going to meet some of them as we go through the course of the evening. But I want to say Deloris and I both joined the Mass Women's Political Caucus Board thanks to our friend Gail Jackson Blunt, who's here. And I want to also say, and I don't know if Carmen is okay with this, because if I bomb tonight, Carmen might be like, I don't know this woman. But I came to communications or journalism or to GBH working kind of at the I would say, observing a wonderful, consummate professional, Carmen Fields, when she was anchor of the 10 o'clock news. And I was, as Deloris said, her Chiron operator there, making sure that I spelled her name correctly, that she on occasion would take off one earring or something. I would tell her, get that earring back on her. But I just want to say, Carmen, like Lee said, really, we really stand on your shoulders. And I'm happy to be here. Lee, you're so welcoming. And so we're welcoming you, but you're welcoming us. And there's something to be said about the fact that we are here in your home and that you've opened the door to us and that you're inviting us to come back again. So thank you for that. Thank you for this opportunity to have this important conversation. And to your entire team, who you all will get to meet shortly. I think I want to share with you just quickly before we hear from the panel some housekeeping things, just so you can know kind of what the agenda is. This is a town hall meeting, right? So town hall meeting, the idea of that is not just folks on the stage speaking to you, but that there's going to be a give and take, that there'll be a conversation. So we have worked into this meeting the chance for Q&A, and we'll have a couple of mics circulating so that you can say what's on your mind. And this is a working meeting. I want to say it's a huge community meeting. Maybe it's GBH's first, or at least with Lee at the helm, community meeting where we're going to have a conversation, and it's like to kind of envision what could happen with leadership that cares about the leadership of women. So we're going to break this up into two panels. The first panel, which you will meet, I promise you, in a moment, will be introduced, and we'll have a chance to have a conversation. Then we'll break, so please don't leave. The break doesn't mean the end of the program. We're going to go to the second group of panelists, and then we'll have our Q&A. And during the quick Q&A, we'll have everybody on stage together, so you'll be able to pose your questions then. So please, during the course of the evening, jot down your questions, because we will not have a question and answer at the end of the first segment. We'll do it when everybody's together. I think the other thing I want to just mention is this program is not being live streamed. We went back and forth on it, but I think it's better that it's not, but it's going to be on air, so you will be able to see it. Your friends can see it. Frederic and Andrew will make that happen for us, which is wonderful. They've been just awesome to work with. And Andrew thinks he can get it up and running in the next, 2-3 weeks. So you will have your friends and people who couldn't make it here tonight will have access to this. Also, if we have a little glitch in the program, we get to clean that up. And so I think our panelists feel relieved that that's how we're doing it. Okay, I think I've covered everything, but I want to just say, really, it's with a pleasure to see you all here. And after we hear from this panel, the next panel, I do have some key acknowledgments that I want to mention, because I want you all to know who's here with you, okay? And I think we want to be friends. We're part of the same community. We want good things for our community and our state, and that's what this is about. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists.
Hello. My name is Dr. Laurie Nsiah-Jefferson. I am the director of the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy, a think tank housed at the McCormick School of Policy and Global Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. We offer graduate certificate and MPA programs in gender leadership and public policy, and we also offer public convenings that mobilize community and women's political participation related to voting, civic engagement, and electoral representation, particularly for women of color. At CWPP, we are building a pipeline of leaders in Massachusetts who will work to support policies that would create greater social, health, and economic opportunities for women, people of color, and their families. This fall, please join us for our New England Women's Policy Conference, where women leaders from over 100 organizations dedicated to women's policy, empowerment, and racial equity continue the important conversation we are having tonight at this town hall.
Hi everyone, I'm Diana Hwang, the founder of the Asian American Women's Political Initiative. We fondly call it AAPI. We are the country's only political leadership organization for Asian American and Pacific Islander women, and we work to ensure that API women have a voice in our democracy. When I got my first job as a state house aide, I remember being so excited and telling my dad. He was so worried about me, he almost started crying. And he said to me, "You'll never be one of them." In the wake of the ongoing anti-Asian violence and the Georgia mass shooting that killed 8 people, 6 of them Asian women, I thought a lot about what my dad said. And like so many of us, we realized just how urgent it was to change the invisibility that leaves our community vulnerable to the targeted hate we're still seeing today, and to build political power in our community. We plan to activate and mobilize at least 50,000 APIs and API women by 2025. Working in solidarity with women and women of color to make change for all of our communities is so core to our work. So that's why I'm excited to be here, to dig into this conversation and to share space with all of you.
Hello, my name is Melissa Ferretti. I am the chairwoman of the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe of Plymouth. The Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe seeks to strengthen the awareness and study of the history, language, and pride of the Wampanoag Nation, and to preserve, promote, and protect the common welfare, cultural, spiritual, and economic well-being of our tribal citizens. I am working with our tribal council on economic development, health and wellness, employment and training, protection of Indigenous rights, sacred sites, and burial grounds, and working to uplift the voices and leadership of women in the Commonwealth by empowering other well-intentioned citizens to run for public office. And I am also very passionate about educating the public about the rich history of my tribe. To learn more about our work, contact us at info@herringpondtribe.org or www.herringpondtribe.org.
So I'll start with you, Laurie. I know something about Laurie's background. She comes from a family that was committed to civil rights in Newton, with her dad being a counselor, city councilor, and so on. But tell me, how did you become what I'm going to call a champion for women's leadership and for the causes that you are advocating for?
Well, first of all, I'm very glad to be here tonight. It's an absolute privilege to be in the room with all of you. And what I'd like to say is that it was in my blood. There was no way that I could not be involved with issues relating to equity and fairness for women and for people of color. Again, as Charlotte noted, my dad ran for office in Newton because he was concerned about issues relating to fair housing. It was really very important that we in Newton could live wherever we wanted to live. That was critically important. In addition to that, my mother was a serious role model to me because she did not just address issues relating to race, but also the intersection of race and gender. So I have to say, that is where my roots began, and that's why I'm who I am today. So I will give a shout out to my mom and my dad. Furthermore, I will say that when I went into college with that background, I took a course, and the course was the sociology of health. And I had never heard the fact that there was a relationship between poverty and health status. And that just really piqued my interest. And I said, wow, okay. So I was going to go to law school, and I love all the lawyers in the room today. But I decided that I wanted to go into public health. I wanted to go in public health because I wanted to find out more about the relationship between poverty and health, race and health status, and I also knew there were not people of color enough people of color who were addressing the issues relating to administration, research, and policy. So I could go on and on. I don't know how much time we have, but I do want to say those are my roots, and I decided that I was going to make a difference, no matter how. I was going to make a difference, and until this day, that is clearly and critically important to me, that I continue to move and shake, and that I don't give up, because it's very, very easy to give up in these times.
And of course, you've started a leadership academy on an annual basis where you have students coming to the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy at UMass-Boston to learn the skills and to learn from other leaders, right?
Yes.
So that's So let's move to Diana. Same question to you, Diana. You shared with us, you're the founder of OPPI. And you mentioned a little bit about a motivating fact that your dad played in your decision to seize the day and to take on what was a big challenge. He was fearful for what that would mean for you. But how did you overcome that and overcome his doubts and his worries about your well-being at the State House and beyond?
I think I didn't really understand his fear. I understood inherently, in hindsight, his immigrant experience, like just even remembering like as a child being a 5-year-old kid at the grocery store. And my dad is one of the smartest people you know, but he's good at math, and his English is really broken. And I remember the clerk had overcharged us for something, and he was trying to explain and defend the family. And I just remember like he was raising his voice, sort of just overcompensating, and watching the clerk, and I'm a 5-year-old kid, watching the clerk talk very slowly to him and talk down to him like he was stupid. And I remember being so embarrassed that I ran away, you know? And those are like the reflections I heard in him when he almost started crying about the idea of me going to the State House. And I think I've always understood that to be his immigrant experience. And then I went to the State House, worked there as an aide, worked at City Hall, was one of the only Asian Americans in that building. 200 legislators at the time, this is 2006, there are no Asian Americans whatsoever. And I realized in these buildings of incredible power and influence, Asian Americans were invisible, right? That's what my dad felt. That's what he meant. And that when you don't see faces that look like yours, you can't imagine that you belong, right? So look, like I don't think anyone necessarily imagines the impact they could have. I think the question was literally how do you change it, right? Like how do you change this invisibility that goes to the core of why our communities are suffering and literally why Asian Americans are truly invisible. So I think for me, it was just this idea that like, I was trying to create what I wish I had had, right? A State House fellowship program where we could bring API women together. And by the way, low income and immigrant API women, okay? We need these places of power. There is privilege, right? And access that is denied to you if you are not connected, right? So there's a reason why these places of power look the way they do. And so we were deliberate about going to community colleges, local colleges, to recruit. And let me just tell you, like, it's essentially an internship program with some mentoring, okay? These young women would say to me, I don't feel qualified to apply. That's how deep it went. That's how deep the imposter syndrome, right? That's how deep that goes. And I think for us, primarily, we are trying to build a political pipeline, trying to build a bench. We're trying to build power, but more than that, I think we're trying to change this idea, this notion that is so embedded in not only the narratives we see out there, right, but in ourselves. We've internalized them, that we are not worthy. We're not worthy to be seen by our government. I mean, like, imagine asking these women to apply for an internship program and then asking them to run for office. Like, that's not gonna happen, okay? Right? So like, we literally have to start here. We have to start at the core before we can make real change for everyone in our community.
So I just say, how do you go from the aide at the State House to establishing the first organization for AAPI women, political organization?
I wish I could say like I was like a superstar or something, or like some genius. Like I literally was like, I think I was a little like naive. Like I'm 26 and I'm like, I'll try this. Like let's just go for it. I mean, like, by the way, every founder I know says if they knew in hindsight like what it took, they'd
Wouldn't do it.
It wouldn't have happened, right? So I think it just,
Well, we'll come back. We'll come
Okay.
back to that. But I just,
Sure.
it's something, we'll come back
Okay,
to that.
thanks, Cheryl.
Okay, because your story is important and how you got to that point is key. Let's go to Melissa. Melissa, you are an elected official, first Wampanoag woman in the Commonwealth to serve on the select board in Bourne. Okay, what made you run and how did you do that?
Wow, I think of listening to the two of you, my panelists here. It really hits home because my deep roots really started from someone who I looked up to growing up as well, and I think all of us in this room have somebody that we can think about that was really important to who we are today. And for myself, raised in Plymouth, Massachusetts as a Wampanoag child by an elder of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe, a woman of color, Verna, who was born in 1905 at a very oppressive time. Verna was my mother, and she raised my father, and she raised many of the other tribal children throughout the years, my uncles and such. And Verna was a strong woman of color. She was about 5 feet tall, but she was much taller than that when you met her. And my cousin baby Kathy is sitting over here, and Verna and her sisters were some of the first women to ever work at the Quincy shipyard amongst the men. Yes. So you can imagine tribal women of color at that time working with men, and she was known to outwork 3. We all knew that. But living with Verna and being raised by her was just a gift because she bred it into us that we were always good enough, and that no matter what and where you are, you can always work and achieve whatever you want. And you have to work hard and to get to where you want to. But Verna led me to where I am today. I go back and here I am. I can assure you that moving into politics was really never my intended course. I never pictured myself as chairwoman of my tribe. But I lost my sister to breast cancer, and it just stirred something in me. And I said, it's my time to pick up and to just get stuff done for my tribal community that was at risk, to empower other women and well-intentioned citizens like myself that really just want to do the work and to do a good job and to do right by their tribe and their community.
So we're going to also come back and find out what was your platform, what were you running on, because that will be important for the elected officials out there who will be interested in this conversation. Diane, I want to come back to you as we travel back down this panel this way. And I want to go back to now what we're seeing before our very eyes, right? We've seen women make great strides in terms of the progress around getting to various offices and all of that. Yeah, we have. No, I mean, we're going to name it. We have made progress, but it has been slow.
Yes.
It has been a snail's pace. It has been abysmal.
Yes.
And there's still progress to be made.
Yes.
So we can acknowledge the progress that's been made, but we can also say it's been disappointingly slow, okay? And there are, women in this audience who have run and won, and those who have not been successful, and possibly Danielle Ellen, maybe because... Maybe because, not everybody is ready for the change that we want to see.
Totally agree.
And we have our first Black woman mayor in our audience, publicly elected. And even then, I'm sure you could be on this panel telling us a story there. But okay, so we've seen the progress, and now we are poised, but really potentially to have the first ever woman governor in the Commonwealth. We have, for the first time, a dynamic duo of a woman governor and woman lieutenant governor. We have, and this needs to be mentioned, first Black woman statewide candidate who is potentially is certainly vying for the seat of Attorney General. So, okay, I guess what I want to know from you all right now is, with what you have achieved, what needs to change? Okay, what do we need to do to level that proverbial, that playing field? And tell me what message you would want to send right now, let's say to the governor during her first 100 days. What do you want to see change? What's on the agenda? Diana.
I just want to address, like, it is really slow. The reason I'm like, right? Like, the bar is so low for us, right? like the fact that we are electing our first, it's still all firsts, right? First woman, it's just first woman, right? Like, so yes, there is so much to celebrate, and also, like, we just have to name, like, are we for real? Like, we're still here, right? It's 2022. And like, look, like, for me too, I'm still looking at representation. Oftentimes I'm asked, you know, like, representation versus, like, I'm still talking about representation because we're not even there, right? There are 3 API women in the Massachusetts state legislature. We're such a beacon of freaking hope in Massachusetts. Like it's, when it comes to race and gender, this state is very behind. And what I remember hearing during this campaign was a lot of questions about whether or not this state would elect a woman governor and a woman LG, right? And a woman AG, and, right? There was, I mean, it was persistent, right? So, like, I'm a little shocked myself because everyone was like, I just don't know if we have it in us, right? And so there are persistent narratives that we need to name and address, right? And just, like, always be talking about. Sorry, Charlotte, to your question, I think for me, when I think about, again, this idea of how do we ensure our communities seen and heard, right? Like, which is this deep question I constantly think about. Look, it needs to be intentional, including our communities. It needs to be deliberate, it needs to be sustained. Because too often, we are checkboxes, right? Like, you get one piece of legislation, like, we took care of the API community, boom. Like, you're welcome, hope you're happy, right? And that is not, that's what we're used to, and we accept it, right? And we're not, like, let's take this moment of historic nature celebration to say we want more, right? We need more, because our communities are really suffering. And I think that is our impetus for really dreaming the big dream and going national, which we scaled nationally to Georgia last year and to Pennsylvania this year. We have a rapid expansion plan because we're like, enough. And we are the leaders we have been waiting for, right? So thank you, Danielle Allen, for running. Like, we were so inspired by your candidacy. Mayor Spicer, like, seriously, like, historic. So we're honored to be in your presence.
So seeing and being heard, we're going to hear from the next panel. I bet you they have some ideas around some concrete ways that we can promote that.
Yes.
But that is high on the agenda for Diana. Laurie, given all that you've been doing at the center, what would you say you would like to sort of see the leadership in the State House, in the corner office tackle?
That's a really important question. And the first thing that came to my mind, because this is on my mind every day as a Black woman, is to address racism as the root cause of inequities. Acknowledge it, call it out, and then work with it. And in one of the areas that, I focus on a number of areas, but one of the things that I focus on a lot is health inequities. And one of the things I say is when we're thinking about health inequities, we have to think about the social determinants. So I'm actually in a policy school, and I'm in a policy school because we have to address the relationship between lack of opportunities in education, housing, employment, transportation, and a number of other areas, and how they do relate back. I think the other thing that's really very important, and this is something I teach my students, and someone might say this is pie in the sky, but when we're thinking about policy, how do we make sure that our elected officials are using an intersectional anti-racist approach to the way in which they're developing policy and how they're advocating and addressing our communities in reference to this. That's really very, very important. And one of the things I have to say is women of color are very, very strong people. But guess what? We don't want to always have to be strong all the time. We want to be able to, when we can, to take a break, take a rest. And that requires that we have policies that will allow us to do that. So these are some of the things I've thought about. We have the Racial Inequities and Maternal Health Commission, and I really want to give a shout out to many people in the State House who worked on that. We have 2 people on our board, Representative Liz Miranda, to be senator, very, very exciting, and Kay Khan as well is on our board, who really worked really high. One of the things that we know is that there is a 1.9 times higher rate of maternal mortality in Massachusetts. And if we look at severe maternal mortality, it's even worse. And so one of the things I say, I want to applaud that particular commission for doing the hard work that they did by listening to women's stories, by actually interviewing politicians and going deep into the work, into the literature, into the community. And one of the things I want to see happen, because we did this tour de force in reference to this commission, is to make sure that we have the political will, the human and the financial resources to carry that action plan through. That's critically important. And part of that is thinking about having more midwives and more doulas and more perinatal health, maternal health counselors available to women of color. Some of the work that we did at the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policies, we did a Boston Birth Equity Project, and we interviewed over 100 women about their experiences in birthing in the Boston area. And what we know is it mirrors what was found in the commission report, and we found that women of color were silenced, they were mistreated, and they were not given the care that we want. So I could go further, but I will, as it says, wrap right now. I think that one point that I want to make is that we have this whole concept around reproductive justice. And when we think about the abortion decision that happened not too long ago, there is a relationship between lack of abortion and poor outcomes, health outcomes for women of color, particularly birth outcomes. So I just want to say that we have to root racism in the work that we do and pay attention.
Thank you, Laurie. Melissa, you've got a long agenda in terms of the Herring Pond Wampanoag, and I know that folks here would be very interested, whether it's the seal, the state seal, whether it's mascots in our schools, whether it's sort of holding up our culture and language. Can you talk about that?
I think, all of those things that we work on are exactly what these ladies had said. We go in, we're invisible, and we're expected to just sit back and wait. And, we know the gaps are present for women. And it's just always very important to remember who we're fighting for. So we're working on the state flag and the seal. We're trying to eradicate mascots in the school systems. And we just really need to get those to the new governor, and they, express and fight and have them listen. I know we have a rap, so I was trying to get that.
But if I just took just a minute, just because we don't want to cut your time back, okay? But just tell us, with the state seal, for people who don't know, what's the problem with the state seal?
Well, the imagery itself is a problem in many ways, and some of the language that surrounds it, the sword over the indigenous person's head. So, imagery, there's research studies that are done that prove that they're harmful to our youth and to our children. I can remember myself being a small child looking at these images and thinking, geez, does my nose look that big? You always have the Indian with the big face. And, it's hard. So it's just very important that we educate ourselves on it, on why it's offensive to indigenous people, and really have a governor who's going to listen to that and do the research and learn.
Thank you, Melissa. So we're going to let this panel leave the stage. Yay. We're going to get the next panel on, and then they'll come back. Thank you, ladies.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kat Klein, Associate Director of the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus. MWPC is a nonpartisan statewide organization, and our work is focused on getting more women elected to office. At MWPC, a priority for us is to partner and collaborate with other leaders, both in the public and private sectors. Leaders who want to see more women, including women of color, represented at all levels of government. We are truly pleased to be part of tonight's collaboration with GBH, and it's an honor to stand alongside women who care about racial equity and reproductive rights, who will stand up for our LGBTQ sisters, and who understand the importance of opening doors to young professionals and emerging leaders. I want to thank our corporate sponsor, M&T Bank, and its Eastern Massachusetts Regional President, Grace Lee. And finally, I want to quickly mention that this year, MWPC is planning a big celebration of its 50th anniversary, an in-person event at the JFK Library in Dorchester in November. Join us if you can, and help us support partnerships and collaborations like this one that bring together women and their allies in an effort to lift up our presence and participation, as well as our priority issues.
Hello, my name is Sasha Goodfriend. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of MassNOW, the Massachusetts chapter of the National Organization for Women. We are a member-led movement that has been fighting to pass feminist policy for over 50 years. I joined MassNOW 10 years ago as an undergrad at Boston University. Now, at MassNOW, I work with our leadership board and our volunteers all over the state to fight for over 40 bills at the State House. Top of our agenda is ending period poverty. We founded the Massachusetts Menstrual Equity Coalition in 2019, and our mission is to make period products free and accessible in all school bathrooms, shelters, and incarcerated facilities. Join MassNOW and become a member at massnow.org and learn about our volunteer opportunities, upcoming events, and get to know our leadership board.
Hello, my name is Eneida, and I am co-founder and board chair of Amplify Latinx, a nonprofit organization established in 2017. At Amplify, we seek to build economic power and political parity for Latinos. I am an attorney and former co-chair of the Hispanic National Bar Association's Latina Commission, which focuses on increasing the number of Latinas in the law. My national work on the Latina Commission inspired me to bring the work closer to home. And 10 years ago, I co-founded the Latina Circle, a network focused on moving Latina leaders into positions of power and influence. We hope that our next governor will leverage our network to promote Latino business contracting opportunities, and we hope the governor will seek us out as a resource to identify talented leaders across sectors, and also as a public policy think tank that is focused on shaping economic mobility and inclusive prosperity for all. To learn more about our work or to join our collaborative movement, follow us on social media or contact us at amplifylatinx.com.
Hello, my name is Celia Johnston Blue. I am the president and CEO of the Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition. Our mission is addressing racial inequities that exist for women of color created by structural and institutional racism. Prior to taking on this role full-time, I spent the past 15 years in the public sector leading state agencies in Massachusetts and in Rhode Island, including a cabinet-level position. I am passionate about the work of MAWOC, which entails holding public officials accountable to ensure their real plans and commitment towards addressing these racial inequities that continue to widen for women of color and our communities of color. We simply have no time to wait. It is my hope that the next governor will seek us out as a resource and a collaborative partner to address these very important issues. To learn more about MAWOC, go to mawocc.com.
Again, welcome panelists, another group of dynamic women making change in the community. I'm going to start with you, Eneida. And I know we got a little bit of an idea about your background and what drove you into starting Amplify. But tell us a little bit more about what really got you and Betty, your co-leader, and to get the organization started.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having us. Yes, this was all very organic because I think Diana said it right. It's not like you set out to do this. I mean, I was practicing law. I was involved in this work at the national level focused on Latina leaders. And, and one day I said, you know what, we got to bring it home. And we started this very, very informally focused, not on just Latinas, because there would have been like 3 women in the room, right? Like we needed a little bit more diversity of professions. So we focused on executive leadership for Latinas. And so there was a lot of very positive energy around the work that we did, even though we just met quarterly and we had these cafecitos or little coffees. We'd get together and have breakfast and champion each other and very informally support each other. And we were also very intentional, going back to intentionality, right? And we said, you're a woman on the go, bring a woman on the rise. Because it's not just about those of us that have achieved a certain level of professional status, if you will, but rather also lifting up the next generation and building that bench. So then 2016 happened, and it really gave us all pause. And we had a few people in our community approach us and said, you ladies are the only ones that really have a Latino group that is poised to be able to launch something more. And so that's how Amplify was born. In 2017, we hosted our inaugural conference. You were there.
Yes.
A bunch of people here were there. And again, the energy in the room was extraordinary, and it just built what we have today. And of course, we focused on building economic power and political parity for Latinos because, like we've said here earlier, we need more representation across sectors.
Thank you. So 2 years before Amplify was established, 2015, right?
Yes.
Celia, tell us about how you got MAWOC off the ground.
Okay. Thank you again for having us here today, and thank you to the audience for being here with us today. For me, it was really simply, I was tired. I was really tired of seeing one of us at the table, very few being represented. For my journey, it was usually, we talk about a lot of firsts. I was one of the firsts here in the Commonwealth, and only, I think, African American to run the Registry of Motor Vehicles, right? That agency is, over 100 years old. We're still seeing a lot of firsts, while, to your point, it's progress, but I felt that if we did not focus on us, then but who? And so we had to get our skin in the game and be intentional about calling it out. Dr. Nsiah-Jefferson said that earlier. We are dealing with structural, institutional, internalized racism every day. And if we don't focus on it, then shame on us. And so MAWOC was birthed that way, really with that vision. I reached out to other women of color across the Commonwealth who are founding members. One in particular, Brenda Jenkins in Worcester, was also working with a small group of women and basically came together and said, let's do this. So we were intentional. We spent some time working through the details and did some soft launches across the Commonwealth in 2016 and then publicly launched in 2017. And so here we are doing the work, and there's a lot to be done.
Thanks. Sasha, you're leading a 50-year-old organization. Okay, so we know you mentioned in the video that you sort of became inspired at BU as a student. A lot has happened between college and now, right?
Yeah. So 10 years ago, when I was a sophomore at BU in 2012, there was a series of prolific sexual assaults on campus. And I was a student activist at the Center for Gender, Sexuality, and Activism that had just opened up on campus. And students started coming to us because there was no crisis counselors on campus. And we were trained by the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center. Shout out to BARC for the amazing work that they do. This was not a new issue. You know, students had been fighting for a rape crisis center at BU for generations. And we took this opportunity to work with student groups across the campus, work with our professors, shout out to all the feminist professors that are there, and work with the media to let them know about what was going on, and was able to write a report, all of the steps that it takes, organizing, building coalitions, doing research, meeting with the president of the university, and in 6 months, the university announced that they were opening up a rape crisis center. And when I graduated, I wanted to keep doing this work, feminist change and policymaking, but I didn't see that many organizations that were doing this. So I started working at a cemetery and volunteering on the board of MassNOW, where I taught myself about civic engagement. I had graduated with a degree in international relations, but didn't know anything really about what was happening here in Boston and in Massachusetts in terms of policies that I could fight for, nor did any of my friends. And so I think that there is a huge untapped potential of people who know the system doesn't work, are angry about the same issues that we are, and need to be connected to who their legislators are to show up to make those issues on the policy agenda. So in 2016, MassNOW was able, so in 2014 I joined the board. In 2016 I was 22 and 23 and elected to co-president of the board. I worked at Simmons University for 5 years. And then in 2019, I decided to transition out of Simmons University, where I've been able to work on a lot of feminist bills, and take the leap to transition MassNOW from a volunteer-led organization to a staff-led organization, where I've been able to work as the executive director for the last 3 years, because I want to see more feminist organizers here in Massachusetts, and we've been able to make some progress towards that goal in the last 3 years.
So now let's talk about the agenda. Diana, Laurie, Melissa kind of teed it up a little bit for us, with Diana talking about being seen and being heard. That's what we want from our elected leaders. And Laurie getting into the issues around racism and the disparities related to maternal health, and Melissa talking about the Wampanoag agenda. Let's talk about what we want to see this governor or this leadership team, whoever it is, okay, because we don't have a crystal ball, but should it be a woman, there is some expectations that women are going to see this agenda, this feminist agenda, realized. So, Celia, I know you've thought about solutions. What's on the list?
Okay, so a couple of things. We were talking about representation, and we're going to continue to talk about representation, right? Because it is an issue. So for me, I want to see a diverse cabinet. I don't want to hear anymore about good faith efforts, right? That to me means that you barely tried and you're checking the box, and we're not listening to that anymore. There's too many talented women and women of color in this state in particular, with all these colleges and women of color graduating with higher level of college degrees, that we should be in those positions. So I want to see a diverse cabinet. I want to see women of color, and I want to see that there's real change, that there's an accountability plan, right? Because oftentimes on the candidate trail, you hear all these things, and there's no accountability. There's no follow-up. We don't know what's going on. It's very easy to be able to do that. You can get a chief of data to get all your data and have develop your goals and be able to report out. It's very easy to do that. So I would want to see that this governor has an accountability plan and reports out to our residents every year. It's very easy to do that. You can do that on a quarterly basis, go to different parts of the state. We want to know how things are really going, when they're going well, and when they're not going well. When they're not going well, what you're going to do about it. That's it. It's not complicated, right? We want to see more of that. We want to see an increase in contracting. When I see discretionary spending, I looked at the annual Supplier Diversity Office report. $5.7 billion was spent in discretionary spending, and we're talking $500 million for the BIPOC businesses. We have a wealth gap going on. We have so many gaps, and these things matter. And so I would want to see a real plan. And we have organizations here that can help be a resource. So I want to see that we are plugged in and at the table helping with some of these issues.
Eneida, you know, you have a viewpoint about contracting. And so she touched on something, yeah.
Well, you know, it's music to my ears, of course, everything you said. But I'll dovetail on the economic disparity piece, right? Because we know there's report after report after report, the Boston Foundation, Gaston Institute, all different organizations and researchers find year after year the wealth gap. You know, the Federal Reserve had the color of money, right, study. And which, by the way, is what launched BECMA, you know, and obviously was one of the studies that we used to kind of inspire us to do a little bit more, right? Because we started talking about, you know, the wealth gap, the gender, you know, issues that impact all of us, the, you know, salary gaps, all the gaps, right? It's like, we're tired of talking about the gaps. Let's focus on solutions, right? The studies are out there, the data is out there, we have the information. What are we going to do about it? You know, our gateway cities are often forgotten, right? We talk about Boston, we talk about Massachusetts being such an innovative state and such a rich state, but the wealth is not equally divided. It's not shared. So how do we distribute opportunities and open doors for communities of color, which for the most part are our gateway communities that need the support, they need the innovation, they need the, you know, the injection of, you know, of capital so that the communities thrive. Because quite frankly, it's just a missed opportunity for the Commonwealth. You know, the more opportunities we give our gateway communities and others who, you know, who have the potential to thrive, the stronger we will be.
So this next governor needs to come to those gateway cities and talk to folks. Sasha's going to take us home, and then we can get a Q&A. 40 bills on your agenda at MassNOW? Okay, we're not going to be able to hear about all 40,
no,
but at least...
I won't tell you about all of them, of course. You can go to massnow.org to read more. But a lot of them can be passed through the governor's office in ways that are much faster than our current paces with the legislature. We just saw a month ago a bunch of bills that MassNOW has been working on, the IM bill, the Healthy Youth bill, bills on childcare that passed the Senate, that did not pass the House. And now we have to start the legislative session all over again in January. And I'm mad about that. But in January, we have the opportunity to elect someone who can move much faster in the governor's office if they take that initiative. I want a feminist for a governor, and I want an office in the executive cabinet or office that is looking at every state agency with an intersectional feminist lens. We have that in Boston, in many cities, an Office of Women's Advancement. We now have in Boston for the first time an office or a person for LGBTQ advancement. And that's what intersectional feminist policymaking looks like. We have to be asking around sexual orientation and gender identity questions across all of the state agencies in Massachusetts so that we can do the data analysis. That is not rocket science, to see where our disparities are also. But instead of, you know, an organization like us that is pointing out all of the gaps around issues that are not new but have not been talked about, I would love for the governor's office to invest in staff to take that initiative.
I see a lot of heads nodding. Let's hear from you. I think we're going to just move right to you, the audience, hear what you think about this. Deloris, Pettis, and Kat Klein are going to circulate some microphones, and we're going to ask you to exercise great discipline in not holding on to the mic too long, but just because we are going to relinquish it, but you just ask your question and direct it to the panelists who you'd like to respond, or I'll pick a panelist. It looks like we have someone here, and just tell us your name, and so we can know who you are.
All right, so my name is Cabell Eames. Thank you all for all of the leadership that you display here for all of us. It is really inspiring to hear from each and every one of you. Yeah. So I wanted to start off by saying that I work as a lobbyist on Beacon Hill. I work on Indigenous issues. I work on climate issues. I know you from Mass for News Alliance Coalition, yes. So I work on a lot of issues. And the issue that I see, though, is that they pass laws and then they don't follow through and implement them. And so that's what I want. I don't want the posturing. I don't want the cheerleader. We did this. We passed landmark this. We first this. I want to know how things are going to get implemented, and I want to see impact. And I wonder if anybody could speak to the next steps beyond passing legislation.
That's
Tag your it.
Can you hear me all right? Okay, good. I mean, I think for myself, nice to see you again. I mean, we know that there were 5 bills that are on the Indigenous legislative agenda, and we managed to get the state flag and seal to where it is now, but many of the other ones are still sitting there waiting. So how do we, get those passed? We really have to elevate the voices and really, really get out there and beat the streets and tell people, get people to show up, get people and talk to your legislators, talk to your state representatives, talk to your town officials and anyone who'll listen to get the word out. That would be my.
Will just say, as I'm passing the mic, that I'm so glad you asked that question because, MassNOW is really proud that we have helped pass the ban on shackling of pregnant inmates, and yet I think that's still happening. And I don't know because I'm not in the prisons and jails, nor can I organize that. And so we need leadership in order to, and same with pay equity. MassNOW helped pass the most comprehensive pay equity legislation in the country in 2016 because it banned employers from using salary history to determine comparable pay. And yet, have we moved the needle on that? Probably not, because it doesn't take one bill also to move the needle. These are complicated intersectional issues. And so I would use that to point to childcare. Taking something as big and overwhelming and scary as that is and saying that is perhaps the single biggest barrier towards pay equity or gender equity in the workplace. Harder to solve, but being real about what the issue is and being real about what the data is, because that's important.
And I have a mic, so I'll just say, this is where I think accountability, when we talk about accountability, right? So having organizations really, collaborate and building that coalition and demanding those meetings, and also making sure that it's funded, because a lot of times these bills are passed and they're not funded. So we have to be smart about following, once it's passed, following the trail, right, which is a little bit harder to do, but this is what we have to do. Is it funded? If it's not funded, well, accountability. Why isn't it funded? What are we going to do about that the next session? Or is there a supplemental budget coming up that you can put that money in? And so this is where we have to be really diligent about that.
No, I totally agree. I think when we talk about invisibility being so dangerous, it's exactly this, right? So everyone signed the bills, there's the big bill signing, right? And then it disappears into a black hole, right? And look, we all know this, there's nothing like public pressure. We are so freaking powerful, right? If we pay attention, mobilize our communities and shine a light. It's so funny because we teach our young people like how a bill becomes a law. And I was like, except all of this can happen in 3 hours if it needs to, right? Like there is this long drawn out process where bills go to die year after year, right? Like legislative session, unless there is some impetus, there's some public pressure, there is something that makes them move fast, right? And we're that something. So
Let's ask, we have another question.
Good evening.
Eneida, you can answer the next.
Magnolia Contreras. I'm
Welcome, Magnolia.
I'm an advisor with MAWOC, and it's great to see all of you. I want to first thank each and every one of you for the commitment that you have made personally to pursue these agendas and to pursue the work that you do. It's not easy. Some of us can't do it, couldn't do it. So I want to ask you, where do you draw from personally to keep the momentum going, to keep yourselves going? And I'm not talking about the agenda, but yourselves, because a lot of this work takes such personal effort. And every day, that voice that says, get up today and let's move this along. Diana, we've known each other for like 17 years and you're still at it, sister. Like how, talk about that piece, because we can share with you the end point, right? But I want to have the experience with you, what it's like to get there, and with your leadership, really, where do you draw from to move us there? Thank you.
Magnolia, are you directing it to anyone in particular or anybody? Okay, that's great. Well, I don't know if you want to start with Eneida?
Yeah, I'm happy
and then
to
we'll
start.
Yeah.
I think my
you have your
is
mic.
on.
Good.
Okay, great. Thank you, Magnolia, for that question. And yes, it's absolutely true, right? This is a labor of love for all of us. And I would say that for me, I've always been passionate about women and girls, and not that obviously men are not important. You know, they're a big part of the equation here. But, you know, I think obviously that we are not represented, we're underrepresented everywhere, public, private, you name it. And for me, it's important that women were 50% of the population or more, right? That we have a seat at the table and that there's equitable representation of women. And my inspiration comes from my abuelita, my grandmother, my dad's mom, who was a woman ahead of her time. She was one of the first women ever elected to office in Puerto Rico in the 1940s. So go figure. Very much ahead of her time. And so I grew up around very strong women, and you know, it's all about women power and empowering girls. And so that drives me, right? And when I get knocked down, and you know, and I see the injustices and all these gaps that we've been talking about the whole night, I'm like, you know what? We're going to continue working to close these gaps because we can. Because again, in Spanish we have a saying, "En la unión está la fuerza." And you know, when we're united, we're stronger together. So when we come together, and the power of coalition, you can't go wrong. So when we all come together and for issues, to fight for issues that matter to all of us, I think we can accomplish anything we put our mind to.
Oh, that's beautifully said. Should we try to get another question in? Okay, good. Mr. Titus.
Good evening. My name is Charlie Titus. I am a retired administrator. First, let me say I actually feel very privileged to be here tonight amongst so many accomplished and powerful people. And yes, Diana, you do have power. There's no question about it. I thank you for sharing your stories, particularly talking about what motivated you and how you got started in your organization and in leadership. I do have one question. As I listen to you, I can't help but wonder what role your husbands, your brothers, your fathers, your sons, and I play in the remaking of the women's political contract.
Good question. All right, well, Laurie, that's your colleague from UMass.
Laurie. Thank you, Charlie, for being here. I am very excited because he is someone who's a force to be reckoned with, a black man who is a force to be reckoned with, who made a huge difference in his community and also UMass-Boston. So thank you, Charlie, for all the work that you've done. I want to say that, again, the men in my family, as I mentioned before, my dad, but I will tell you something. My son is 34 years old, and you know what he did? he basically, when he got out of college, he said, I'm going to go work for Congress. And I said, why would you want to do that? Because I had actually worked as a congressional fellow, Congressional Black Caucus. And one of the things he said to me one day, he said, Mom, you really inspired me to do this work. And again, he worked Congressional Black Caucus, he worked for the Senate, he worked for Bonnie Frank, Massachusetts. And again, I think that one of the things that we can do as women is to be role models to our sons and to our partners. And guess what else? I had a dad who told me, you can do any damn thing you want to do. So one of the things that's really important is that we surround ourselves with people who uplift us. Yes. And also the other thing I want to say in reference to the question before, what keeps me going is spirituality as well. We haven't talked about spirituality in here, and we can all be spiritual in our different ways, but there's something that inside of me is my passion, and that is something all that I pass on to my son, and my father and my mother passed on to me.
I'd like to take it. It's okay. I think that, it is working. For me, I have to go back to both of those questions, and thank you for that. My husband has been my biggest supporter. And try to tell me I can't do something, and I'm going to do it. My mother said to me, don't ever let them tell you no. And when I ran for select board and I came to someone in the town and I said, I think I'm going to run for that open seat. The male, mind you, in different situations, said to me, well, maybe you should run for one of the committees or the finance committee first. Well, there's your answer. I had my nomination papers in 2 days later. And my husband was there to stand there. Thank you, Charlie. And my sons, same thing. They are our biggest supporters.
Celia, you've talked about having allies, so this is right down the path of. Yeah, go ahead.
I have Mike. Thank you. So thank you for that question. There were so many things going through my mind. For me, earlier on in Jamaica, where my family's from, I really got to see what it was like to have a real supportive and strong husband in my father. My mother was the treasurer of the church. She was a leader. There were leaders in the community. And he respected and admired her so much. And they were a partner. They were true partners that made decisions together. So I had that image and that real example in front of me, and also the spirituality as well. I mean, we all have our higher powers, I hope. Might be different, but so that helps me. But self-care is really important when you talk about this work. Allies, yes, supporters, to your point. We need everybody at the table. We know we cannot do this work alone, right? We need our allies and supporters. We need our strong men. In my family, there are many strong men, my brother, my father, my uncles, and just so I'm surrounded by that, and I'm very blessed. But we also need to do self-care. Part of that is your spirituality. Part of that is saying no sometimes, which is very hard for us. I'm learning. It's a work in progress. I'm not going to lie. My husband's sitting over there. I can't lie anyways. But it's a work in progress. But we have to attack that self-care. And sometimes we really do need to shut down, because this work is extremely hard. And especially as a woman of color in this country, every day we deal with systemic and institutional racism. And we know now that it takes a toll on our health and everything else. So we've got to take that time to then rejuvenate and then go back at it again. And I look at my daughter, and that gives me inspiration, because there's so much work to be done.
Thank you, Celia. I think we've got another question. Can we do that? Okay, Jamada.
Well, this is a quick comment. So I'm Jamada of the Howard Henry Smith. I take ownership of all those names. This is more directed to Laura and Celia, and a plea to everyone. It was music to my ears, and you hit the nail on the head. As it relates to, I'm always saying that African Americans are just falling through the cracks. And I really like what you said about calling it out in the health and every other part, and then the accountability. And so I'm just I believe what you said. I'm excited with the anticipation because now, I mean, I know all of you now, but I'm very, very happy of these comments. And I don't think I'm excited because I'm not feeling that you're just up here with comments. We are ready. So thank you so much. God bless you.
Last question. Last question. Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ayanna Polk. I am here from the Office of Equity and Inclusion for the City of Boston. So thank you, Sasha, for shouting out women's advancement as well as LGBTQ advancement. With thinking about the theme for tonight, talking about the momentum that we're building tonight, right? And thinking about the political contract, I know amongst us we're kind of renegotiating that contract, right? But I'm also thinking about on the other end with this conversation, how are we negotiating the contract for the women that we're fighting for, right? What are some ways that we can think about as someone who works in city government, who works closely with organizations, elected officials, things like that? Could you please just share some ways that you've been able to mobilize and inspire community to get involved with a lot of the issues that you've been speaking about tonight? Because I feel as though, as you said, it's not something for us to do alone in the State House, it's in the streets, it's online, it's everywhere. So just if you could just share some ways that we could start to bring along Women on the Rise, like it was mentioned earlier, I would really love to get some thoughts from you all. Thank you.
Well, I'll start, and then whoever wants to take it, let me know. But my goal is to have everyone become an organizer, perhaps not professionally.
Let's start over again. Do we need another mic? Can you start over, Sasha?
Yeah.
Okay.
My goal is to have everyone become an organizer, perhaps not professionally as your job, but to find some way that you can identify who your community is and how you're going to move the needle in activating them. And it's a 365-day of the year job. You know, there's voting on election day. We got the primary and the general. But between then, how do we build relationships with our legislators? But also there's probably lots of people who are thinking politics is not for me, but you care about the issue. And one of the things MassNOW is doing on October 12th at City Hall, is a period art pop-up. And it's our 4th period art pop-up because we know artists and creatives are important in this conversation too. And that's a really fun way to get people talking about periods for the first time in a public setting. And so I just want to encourage anyone who's an introvert, who might be more comfortable on Excel. Those are all ways that you can organize too if you're not trying to stand up here and talk to people or talk to your legislator. But there's something for everyone.
So, I'm just going to answer. Go ahead.
Well, I think one of the ways, in the work that I do at UMass-Boston, it's really important work that I do. And I head a gender leadership and public policy program. And we train women to be leaders in the nonprofit sector, in the public sector. And also we have those who have run for office and they are in office. And I will also shout out to Dr. Yvonne Spicer is on our faculty right now. So you know that we got kick ass, right? But I'm saying all that to say that, one of the things is important that we support emerging leaders. That's critically important. And we have to give them a different viewpoint, a different perspective, and a way to disrupt the reality in terms of what we see in all these different areas, whether they're nonprofits, whether they're governments, no matter where they are. And so that's one of the things that's really important to me among many, but I think that we need to pay attention to emerging leaders, and that also means that we have to provide them with the financial support that they need in order to be educated. And we have to give them diverse faculty and diverse leadership and diverse role models.
Thank you.
All right.
As the mic comes,
Can
Celia,
I briefly
yes,
just
yeah.
answer?
And let's just keep it, because we see that sign.
Right,
Yeah, I'm gonna be in trouble.
So just in terms of, I'll just focus on our political and civic leadership platform. We basically start off with a broader strategy this year, and that is to get additional organizations together to really form a broader coalition statewide. And we started by educating, right? Because particularly we focused on because you can't do everything all at once. So this year we said, let's look at the DAs and the sheriff's rates because there's a lot of changes happening. And they have a lot of power and report to the people, and folks do not know most folks do not know their responsibilities. So we started first by educating. We had educational forums. We now have phone banking happening, right, with some of our partners, Mass Voter Table, and we've got a broad League of Women Voters. And then we also have candidate forums, right? So there's a series of how you get the community involved. And so far, we've heard that there's been increase in participation in the primary. So that's just an example in terms of sort of tangible, how you go about it and how you organize, and not do it alone, but do it with others as well, because we all, have resources, challenges, and need help and support of each other to do this work.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's put our hands together. I hate to end abruptly because we could stay here another hour easily. I would love hearing from you all. I've been enjoying it, and I'm supposed to be doing a job here. And one of my jobs is to close us out. So I want to just say thank you, audience. Really, it wouldn't be a success without you. So you being here tonight really meant a lot. We should put our hands together again for the panel. And Diana Hwang, Celia Johnston Blue, Sasha Goodfriend, Melissa Ferretti, Dr. Laurie, Nsiah-Jefferson, and Eneida Roman. You all are fabulous women. Thank you for spending the evening here with us this evening. For those of you who didn't get to pose questions, you can share those with us. We're not going to get lost. We want to know who you are, and we're going to talk to you during the reception. So if there are ideas and issues, talk to us, okay? We have a few minutes after this program to get better, to connect. I want to say on behalf of the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus, GBH, you're a fabulous partner. I thank you, Annie Scheffler, Frederique Rigolo, and Andrew Van Nass, and Abby Blake, and also Cullen Cockrell. Thank you very much, Ali Armijo. Great work. And I want to acknowledge several leaders in the room here, because there was a lot of conversation about legislation, and we have a legislator with us, and that is Senator-elect Liz Miranda. And Liz, we're very proud of you. I've known you for many years, and I know you can do a great job in the Senate, and you are very involved with many of these organizations. You're hands-on, and I wish you much success. I mentioned Danielle sort of casually, but Danielle Allen is here, first Black woman to run for governor in the Commonwealth. I want to mention, I know we may have some folks here from the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women, and I know they're our friends, Danella Clark and Shatia Spruill. I also want to mention, I think we have Nora Bent with us, the director of the Caucus of Women Legislators. You just met Ayanna Polk from Mayor Wu's Office of Women's Advancement. Yvonne Spicer has been mentioned several times, and there are others. So I want to thank you for being here, and we are going to have this great reception that's waiting for us. M&T Bank made sure that we could have a reception, and I think I'll leave with the sentiment that Eneida expressed, that we need to come together, we need to be united, and we need to be strong. So thank you, everyone. Good night, and appreciate you.